for 2 minutes and listen to our brother tell us how Jesus and our Father knows our land. Remember, I told you today we are coming up with one of the Ambazonian statesmen, Barrister Timothy. I want to inform the Ambazonians that he is already in the studios with us. But before he comes in, let's listen to this, our brother.
And you know my name. I give you glory. Abba Father, you know me. You know my name. Abba Father, you know me. You know my name. Abba Father, you know me. You know my name. You know my name, oh Daddy. I can see your hand in my life. Lord, I see your love upon me. Every time I look around, now you are the see. Every time I turn around, now you are the view. I dey hear your voice in my heart. Lord, I feel your love over me. Every time I look around, now you are the see. Every time I turn around, now you are the below. Abba Father, you know my name. Papa, you know me. Yelele, 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 yelele. Yelele, yelele.
Thank you very much, Reverend Sama. We need men and women like you to keep us going. Yeah, today in our program, as I told you, in our Amba history, our Amba history is a program that we come in here to educate you, to inform you, to advise you, to correct you, and to make you to understand the truth concerning our land, Ambazonia. It has been hidden for a long time, and every indication from those of you who understand a little bit of relationship, you will know without anybody telling you that La Republique will not carry armored tanks and carry machine guns and drive into Betua to quell anything they call rebellion in Betua. They will not use tanks. But tanks are used for countries across countries to fight war. And that is an indication, an indicative that we were never one with La Republique du Cameroon. So I just want to bring that note. And I tell you that our brother is here, Barrister Timothy, and he is very, very articulate and knows much of what is going on in Ambazonia now, because from the way I see him, he is above 60. And anybody above 60, if that person does not know the history of our Ambazonian land, it means that that person was either born mental or he became mental along the road. And so we are not going to go very, very far. We'll just cut in, because every day, as we are talking here, we are making history. So we're not going to go back to 1961. We are coming very close. And as we are coming very close, things that are passing just now, which are turning into history, we want to be repeating them so that you can know that this is what and who Ambazonia is. Now, Barrister, welcome into the studios, and then say hello to your people and also to the people in the world that are watching and wanting to know exactly what we are talking about. And then from there, we pick up. Over to you.
Thank you, Komando. Thank you very much. Thank viewers, thank listeners around the world, Ambazonians, French Cameroonians, and the world at large. This is history. History, we're on a learning curve. We have to learn. And in order to build the future, we must know the past. The future is built on the past. And so until we know this history, some of us may never know why we're fighting to death. Some of our sympathizers and our critics will never understand why we are where we are. So it is absolutely important for us to know the history behind all this thing that is going on today, 60 years after the purported joining. Again, Ambazonians in particular, the world at large, French Cameroonians in particular, and the United Nations as well. Thank you very much. I'm sure I will make a fair contribution. And as I always said, whoever has a contrary view of the facts I gave is very much free to challenge me or challenge us. Thank you very much.
Thank you once again and welcome. Let's go to very recent current events that have now turned into history. A few days ago, one Ambazonian, because I finally found out that she was an Ambazonian, who is working as a slave girl in La République du Cameroon. Now we call it slave girl because actually that is it. Who was saying that the narrative that Ambazonia is a different country from La République Cameroon is not true, because we obtained our independence by joining. So, Barrister, with your historical background of where we are coming from as Ambazonia, and this kind of myopic statement from this, our sister, who has decided to become a non-entity in her thinking, and also has decided to become uncontented with the crumbs she's eating in La Republic, can we now think that she is ignorant and explain what it meant by obtaining independence by joining? Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. I think my explanation should help her. I believe honestly that she's just ignorant. Like many others, there are thousands and millions of Ambazonians and sympathizers around the world who do not understand exactly what happened when they talk about independence by joining. It takes us back to 1961, and in fact to 1959, when they were debating this nonsense of plebiscite, wishing to get independence by joining A or B. Until we get there first, let us get from there, so they might understand that their idea of joining is a farce. It never happened, could never have happened that way. Let me take it back to 1959, the beginning of the idea of joining. In 1959, La Republic was not a United Nations. Neither were we. Neither was even Nigeria. None of us had gotten independence. But at the United Nations was UK, the administrator, was France, another administrator. When they started debating joining, independence by joining, what did they mean? And what had they contemplated? This takes it to the United Nations resolutions, 1352. When they talked of independence by joining either Nigeria or by joining La République du Cameroon, a future independent country, Nigeria, or a future independent country called Cameroon, what were they contemplating? And what did these countries that were going to join have in mind? In the law of contracts, before you get into any rare contract, two of you must have the same goal, must have the same purpose. If there's no community in purpose or in goal, the contract is void. For example, if you go to marry A's daughter, Mr. A's daughter, called Marie, this man has 5 daughters, and you want to pay your dowry, thinking that you are marrying girl A, called her Rita. And it came the day, and the brought you girl B, called Anna. They can be no marriage because you were not marrying Anna, you were paying your dowry for Rita. So your community was not there. You paid the money for a wrong woman. You paid the bride price for a wrong partner. And so I take it back to 1961 now. What did La République understand by independence by joining? In their mind, there was never to be any independence by joining. In their mind, they were thinking of reattachment. That's why they use all the time reunification. They were thinking of reattachment of the territory given to UK to administer, to the territory given to France to administer. So that is the foundation of their reattachment, reunification. And how do you know this? Even when Northern Cameroon voted voluntarily to join Nigeria, La République went an extra mile to go to The Hague at the International Court of Justice to challenge the will of the freely choosing will of the Northern Cameroonians. At The Hague, they said, no, they should not have gone to Nigeria. They should have come to attach themselves to us. They lost that battle at The Hague. And so today, what was Northern Cameroon is part and parcel of Nigeria. Then down to us, Ambazonians, former British Southern Cameroonians. When we were voting for unification in the plebiscite, it was a popular vote. La République didn't take part in it, not in any form or shape. They never took part in the plebiscite of 1961. But what was Foncha thinking, Foncha delegation that campaigned for unification thinking about? They were thinking, finally, all this piece of paper, federation, this and that. That's what Foncha thought about. La République du Cameroon, which was not a popular government at all. The Foncha government was popular. It was voted by you and me, by our parents, on one man, one vote. The government of East Cameroon, then La République du Cameroon, was never a popular government. They had gotten independence in 1st of January 1960 without any vote. They didn't vote Mr. Ahidjo to become president, so nobody knew him. They didn't even have a constitution as of 1st January 1960. They had no constitution. The French had carefully nominated this man, imposed him on the people, and he became the president. They never had a constitution until February 1960, 2 months after Mr. Ahidjo became president. And he was not even voted president. He became president in April, when they voted their first parliamentarians into the assembly. And that parliament co-opted him. He didn't go for any popular vote. So what this guy was talking was not something from the people as a whole. It was his ideas as imposed to him by the French. And what were their own ideas? They believed that we were coming to reattach ourselves, to reunify with them. And I've explained. That's why the basis of all this reunification that they use all the time. And would you have symptoms of this? Yes. Now, fast forward, Foncha was thinking a different thing. The Foncha delegation was thinking of a different thing. It was every delegation that went to Fumban. While Ahidjo had a different thing in mind. Therefore, there could be no community in thinking. They could not unite when the two people were thinking of two separate things. They could not unify. They could not agree even on the basic principle you are joining as what. And there are all these indices that show what it is all about. Again, we have always talked about this so-called federal constitution of that was implemented on 1st of October 1961. This first federal constitution was adopted by the French Cameroon parliament. And we've always argued, why was this not adopted by our National Assembly in Buea? The federal constitution that they talked about, we'll all talk about Article 47, but there's more in it than Article 47. Article 47 simply said that you cannot change the character of a federation. No way shall they change the character of a federation. But those were just words. Was there any federation at all, even as per the 1961 so-called federal constitution? There was no federation in that thing. If that thing had been taken to the parliament in Buea, could he even have had a single vote to vote for it? The answer, I think, is no. Why? Because if you look into that constitution, so-called federal constitution, it was not a federal constitution. It had nothing to do. There was no federation in that constitution. A federation means that the states have some functions to perform. That constitution did not provide for anything called state authority. All what they provided was federal authority. And this is properly outlined in Article 5, 6, and 7 of that constitution. There's no other article that talks about the states will do this. No. Article 5, 6, and 7 outline the functions of the federal government, which are the functions of the state. Every little item, even to taxes, even to weights and measures, talking of a kilogram, talking of a pound, weight, was reserved for the federal government. Even what they are doing now, the so-called security, the police, internal and external security was reserved for the so-called Ahijo government. Frontier government in Buea had nothing. There's nothing even mentioned there in the federal constitution that these are the powers of the state government. There was nothing that there. So the federal constitution was just a name. It had no meaning other than the word federal there. And the so-called Article 47, that had no meaning at all. So there was no federation for them even to think about. And fast forward, there's all this evidence put out there in black and white. Before October 1st, 1961, La République de Cameroon had 4 regions. They had the littoral, they had the west, they have the north, they have the center and east. This constituted one region. These were 4 regions in that country. And when we joined them, we purportedly joined them, they did not consider us as a state. They consider us as a 5th region, one of the 4 regions, one of the 5 regions of their entity, Cameroon. Is there evidence of this? Yes. If we are familiar with Yaoundé, for those of you who are familiar with Yaoundé, if you go to Yaoundé and you are driving from the mess officier from that military hospital downtown through the National Assembly, you see to your right, depending upon where you're coming, almost opposite the National Assembly, there's a monument. They call it the Unification Monument. That Unification Monument put there, started in 1965-66, has 5 children carrying off their hands. Each of the children represents one of the 5 regions that were supposed to be in that federation. The 4 original regions and the 5th region, which was supposed to be West Cameroon. That's documented. It's written there. It's built. That is still standing there. They call it Monument de la Unification. And so that indicated it. And so what happened then? To show that we were not even a federated state as we claimed to be, as soon as we purportedly joined this on 1st of October. A month after that, Ahijo appointed what they call a Federal Inspector of Administration. The Federal Inspector of Administration, called J. Singo, came to Buea. He had more powers than the Prime Minister. He oversaw in fact, he was the Prime Minister, call it like that. He was said to be the personal representative of the president, who had every power to do anything, to veto even what the Prime Minister did. Was this new? No. They also had a Federal Inspector of Administration in Douala, that one in Yaoundé for the Center East, that one in Garawa for the North, that one in the Bafoussam, Ochang, for the West. So they just brought what they had. There was no federation at all in their mind. And so we have to understand this, that what Paul Biya said sometimes in 2017, that they intended, they tried to assimilate or to absorb Ambazonians. I did not succeed. They've been doing this from day one. They did not, that in fact, that was just a public confession. The attempt to absorb us have been from day one of the unification, so-called unification, based on the text they put out and based on what they were doing. Did you know what they were doing? Yes, they expected resistance. They expected that the Funchas, the Indeles, would resist. And so they put out measures to counter any possible resistance. What did he do at first? As early as February or March 1962, just 3-4 months after the so-called Oktoberfest, they passed an ordinance, the famous ordinance, which was supposed to be a repression to use to repress rebellion. And that's the text they use all the time. Each time somebody went out to protest against what was happening, they invoked it, and then they caught you and locked you up. That's what we are told plainly, that when 1972 came, and he purportedly tried to abolish this thing, so-called federation, Foncha was still alive. Mona was still alive. These people assembled at late Fonlong's house in Bastos, I think. They say, what's happening? What do we do? He simply invoked that thing, went and dispersed them and sent them away. They could not even meet to discuss what was going on. That text was used. That's the same text they used in the 80s to lock up Abel Mukong, to lock up Dinka, and anybody who raised a finger, because they expected this. And so, fast forward, that thing remained there and remained there and remained there until 1990, when they claimed that they were passing reformatory laws. They thought everything had been done. Everything had finished. So they purported to abolish the 1962 on repression of rebellion and so on and so forth. But as I've said in previous statements, the abolition of the 1962 ordinance was short-lived. Because in 2014, just 14 years after the abolition, they brought it back under the law repressing rebellion, anti-government activities, which is a very law. They are using now to hold us, you and me, and lock us up. So again, there was nothing like a federation. We didn't contemplate, we were not contemplating a reunification. What we thought was that we were going to join this thing as a federation, maintain our own institutions. But again, Article 5, 6, and 7, which is so detailed, of the so-called federal constitution, simply abolished that. They took over trade. They took over even disputes between farmers, went to the federal government. And so the government in Boya had nothing to do. But they knew that there was a government in Boya. And so what did they do? They tried at every moment to undermine it by themselves and by looking what we call today coup plotters. They look for people among ourselves to undo the institutions that existed at the time. They got a Muna to bring down Foncha. They got Fonka Shang Laurent to bring down Muna. They did all these things to kill the idea that we ever existed. Finally, they set off something they call Northwest and Southwest in 1972. That did not end there. They got ourselves, they got our brothers, our sisters to promote the nonsense of Northwest Southwest. What did they do? They got in there, they got E.T. who remained in the government house in Yaoundé until he died, to show that there was something called Southwest which he could not survive with it. They got Mokete, may so rest in peace, to preach that doctrine for them. And in return, they gave him the job of chairman of the CDC board and all that rubbish things. And thousands of others. So they got all our people to fight against ourselves. Today, as we speak, they still got in them. They find the Mosonges there, the Ngolengoles, whose sole duty is to preach the doctrine of Northwest Southwest divide. And so they have used us throughout history to destroy ourselves. And so, again, there was initially nothing called a federation. On text, anywhere, the federal constitution was fast. And so we could not quote a federal constitution. There was nothing that in that document, which I have right here, called a federation. There was nothing to hang on. And so they purported to abolish what did not even exist. But they abolished it nonetheless, thinking that they thought that they had pacified the country, everything was in order. Unfortunately, again, they have not destroyed that monument, the reunification. It is still standing there. They have not demolished it. It's still standing there.
Yeah.
If you pass in Yaoundé today, you see that building standing there, that structure. It is a structure, but under it is supposed to be a supermarket. But the outright structure is there with 5 people with their hands up there, representing the 5 regions as contemplated in 1964-65 by Ahijo. Paul Biya was not even there, but by Ahijo's government. Again, the government of Ahijo was not a popular government like Frontier government or Indele government that depended on the people's vote. It was a government that was set up by the French to fight the UPCs. They appointed Ahijo as the president, got him confirmed by the regional assembly or whatever thing they call it there. But by 1964, when they wanted him to do a popular election of people to go to their national assembly, there was only one party that successfully muscled the UPC and other political parties. And so there was nothing like an election. What Ahijo was doing to us, he was not accountable to the population of East Cameroon. He was not accountable to them. He was not telling them where he was going. That is why, till today, most of our brothers in the East Cameroon, brothers and sisters, don't even know what it is. All what they know is what Ahijo told them. And what did he tell them? Oh, our brothers are coming back to us. He didn't even tell them the conditions. That's why all they talk about reunification. Oh, no fresh on revenue. And you find it nowhere else than the so-called Fuma conference. Look at the banner they put there, the big banner. How happy are we to meet our brothers from the other side? A large banner. People did not read into it. Now we can read the fine print of what they were trying to say. Now, they wanted to destabilize us. They are still continuing. And to that lady who asked that question, I want to address this particular part of it. We're resisting all along. But the resistance that started from the Fumban conference, because the people left Fumban conference without resolution and said, no, we cannot take this nonsense. The resistance continued. Once they disabled the so-called government of West Cameroon, the resistance continued. But it continued as individual actors, as splinter groups, which is why they never even cared about that. Who were the individual actors? Fast forward in the 1980s, you found people like Dinka. This was an individual. Dinka himself had been a committed man thinking that the thing was good. Sorry for his misunderstanding. That was Dinka in the 1980s was the Secretary General of the FACO or the FACO CNU because they believed in it. So they started opposing this thing as individuals. The Abel Mukongs Abba Mukong was in Fumban. He was in Fumban. But they just wanted to join these people. They did not even read the fine print of it. They were now the first victims. Yeah, and they believe that if you were challenging them, they will muscle you by locking you up, by jailing you, silencing you until you keep quiet. And so it was individual or small groups. Then fast forward again to the 1990s when this thing took its real form. You found the SCNC that came up there. The SCNC was the most powerful pressure group, but it was still a group fighting to restore what we had. That way, the poor people continued to ask for a return to the federation. Yeah, and they did not care because it was just a pressure group. From the SCNC, you think there's CAPO, Southern Cameroon's People's Organization. It was a project group. What things like CAM, they were project groups. If they went too far, if they project too much, the government pretended to yield. And they gave something thinking that to calm down that moment of anger. Examples are there. Scapo and CAM in particular, they fought for what they wanted was an examination board to handle our exams. They fought, they were tear gassed, they were beaten, they were locked up. But what happened? Government found that it could not work. So it's okay, we'll give you your thing. They changed it to examination board, GCA board. But before we give you one, we'll give our Francophone brothers their own. They created a backboard first in the first decree and created the GCA board in the next decree. But there was a distinction. The GCE board had to be managed by a board of directors, not by the Minister of National Education in Yaoundé. No. They created a board. I was in Boya when Mr. Amba, may so rest in peace, as the Minister of Education, came to install the first board. The first board chairman was Mr. S. Ndio, may so rest in peace. He had been principal of Kas Bambili. So, Mbele Mbappe said, well, in his statement quoting him, R2 was there. In other words, R2 was there at the creation of the GCA board. They installed S. Ndio as the chairman of the board. The board was created. The registrar of the board and other senior workers had to be chosen by the board. Azon Wara was the first registrar, was chosen by the board. That was in the text of the GCA board. And what happened? When the tempers calmed down, they simply abolished that. The thing was simply stopped. Today, the chairman of the board, who is then Professor Tambo, was chosen by the minister. The registrar of the board is a minister appointee. The rules for getting the registrar was that the board would select 3 people and send the names to the ministry where they must choose only one of the 3. So they evaluated it, they just simply trash it. That the board is no longer what it was meant to create. Again, the very Scapo, CAM, and all these project groups fought for what they wanted to call an Anglophone university. They fought and fought and fought. Remember, there was something in Boya called the University Center for whatever thing in Boya there. When it came to pass, when they realized that they could no longer resist, they said, okay, we'll give you an Anglophone university. Go and write where you want to be in the Anglophone university. And when I made the proposal, I still remember, I don't know whether other things have changed. That is the only decree that ever came out of the presidency in English. The decree creating the University of Boya. It came out, first impression, English language. It was really English. They put out all the faculties they wanted there, what they wanted the university to be like. But then, among those things that they put there, until then, the chancellor of all universities in Cameroon was the minister of higher education. That was not the case with Boya, under the Boya text. Under the Boya text, the man who was supposed to be in charge of the superior political chancellor was the pro-chancellor. They did that. They created all these faculties in English to please the people who were fighting for an Anglophone university. And there was a provision in that thing which I still enjoy today. They provided in the original text of the University of Boya. They didn't contemplate this thing of creating university left and right. Do you know that if you had this single Anglophone university, that might take us for centuries. And so under the University of Boya, original text in English, they created a faculty of engineering. Then they proposed a school of engineering to be in Bambili. It was written in black and white. When that thing went to the presidency under Joseph Owona, then he was Secretary General. He said, now the Bambili people are fighting for SDF. We cannot get anything. They simply cleaned off School of Engineering in Bambili. They didn't take it out of the whole text, but they simply took it out there and put it as another sub-article under the Faculty of Engineering. So the text that came out of the presidency creating the University of Boya had the Faculty of Engineering and the School of Engineering in Boya. What does that mean? How do you have those two together? But again, fast forward, where are those things today? They simply clean them off when the temperature calms down. Total deceit, desire to enforce their policy of assimilation. What's the difference between the University of Boya today, the University of Ngaoundere, the University of Chang? They are the same. There's nothing to make an Anglophone university. That was contemplated and written down in English by the Anglophones.
Okay, thank you very much, Barrister, for that lengthy history, just to help this our young lady. She's called Vivian Lemfon, and we had to go right back there to make her understand that Ambazonia was never and shall never be a part of La République du Cameroon. So that's why our historian today took that time to give you facts and figures, plus dates and times. So any Ambazonia whom La République has deceived over the years, especially in hiding their anniversary, that is the 1st of January 1960, which was their Independence Day, should know why they are not celebrating their Independence Day, because they know that if they start celebrating it, there will be a lot of questions, even to those who are, slaves under them. So they try to hide some very important data and dates in order to put Ambazonians back in confusion. All right, let's get back to Barrister. Barrister, thank you very much for that explanation. We now know that over the years, the fighting has been individuals or groups and never a government. Now, when the interim government came in place, I would like you to recount to us how it all happened, and especially during this last, I think on the 31st of December, the president of the Federal Republic of Ambazonia reiterated that Ambazonia is the 55th nation of Africa, not chronologically, because it got its independence before some other African countries and was forgotten. Let's pretend to say that it was forgotten. But can you tell us how the Foncha government met a Hijo government, and after that game that they played, all the other groups that you have mentioned went either as individuals or like pressure groups, and they failed. And today, the interim government is standing with its cap very high over there. Over to you.
I was coming to address that, and I will address it. I was still laying the foundation for that particular, because that's where I will end. So now came 1993, with AAC1 and 1994 with AAC2, which were all still pressure groups. I took part in both. AAC1 insisted on a return to the federation, which did not even exist anyway. But they realized that the 1961 so-called federal constitution was so defective. So AAC1 set up a constitutional drafting committee, which drafted a proposed federal constitution. They translated it into French. I took part in some of the translations. They paid a bailiff to deliver this thing to the presidency in Yaoundé. It was delivered. There was not even an acknowledgement of receipt of that document. A year after, they met. This is now 1994. They met again in Bamenda, called AAC2, and transformed themselves into SCNC. And noted that they had not even acknowledged receiving their documents of AAC1. That's why they wrote in the Bamenda Proclamation that if Yaoundé failed to act within a reasonable time, they were going to reconstitute themselves into a different group and reactivate and restore the independence of British Southern Cameroon. That is written there in black and white. Fast forward from the AAC 1 and 2. You found groups, other pressure groups that came up before, but we got there. They had this document in 1996 now, almost 2 years after Bamenda. They purported to put out what they call the Constitution of today. They received all these documents from us. They did not even tell Anyangwe, they did not tell Samuel Kontang Ella, they did not tell Munzu that we have received these things. But they carefully, steadily, crafted in the 1996 Constitution, somewhere the special status, they didn't even say we'll come for, they said the government may grant special status to some groups and kept it quiet until when this thing came up, they started fighting. They said, oh no, we have it in the Constitution. It was all viciousness. But what I was trying to say is this, from 1996 and 1997, you had groups that came up. One group came up that was led by Akwanga and his friend Cho Ayaba. The SYLC, whatever they call that nonsense, was never meant to fight for the independence of Southern Cameroon. No, have this in writing, have this right. The Cho Ayaba and Akwanga were not created to fight the Republic for independence. They were created to fight SCNC under Mfongalamfo because they thought that they were not doing enough. So the SCN, the Cho Ayaba and Akwanga were created to fight. In fact, they were the products of the University of Boya. They are going to that University of Boya. They were all fired. Because of their activities there, they were dismissed. And so they came out creating these factions groups to fight Mfongalamfo, who had been to every single prison in Southern Cameroon, that he was not fighting enough for this struggle. That's the basis under which they existed. That's the basis under which Cho Ayaba fled the country. That's the basis under which Akwanga was sent to prison and he escaped. And so, Yaoundé was not bothered. It was still a factional thing. And now, where I'm going to address the issue you have mentioned, the so-called interim government. Yaoundé did not care about whether it was coming from SCNCs, Capo, CAM. These groups meant nothing. They knew they could not mount the project because in Mfongalamfo, they went to all places in the world, but there's no organization that you go there. That Republic is not yet there. They have diplomats there, senior diplomats, so you could not counter them as a single project group. And so, fast forward came 2016. The first thing they did was to ban the consortium that was posing a threat to them because they will let you function until you pose a threat to them. They did not ban only the consortium. They banned the SCNC. Those are two organizations that were banned. SCNC was not leading the demonstration in 2016. They were not part of the consortium, but they were banned because they saw them as the brainchild behind all this struggle. And so these people all disappeared and found themselves in Nigeria. And this brings me to the issue that you have asked. In Nigeria, they reconstituted. Not just in Nigeria, there's people from South Africa came in, other places around Africa and some around some different parts of the world joined. And that's why you found that transition from Skakov to governing council and finally the interim government on the 30th of October 2017. That was the lynch point. That was where Yaoundé felt that they were already so threatened. Once they created something called the interim government, ANC, SCNC are not created national government. SCAPO are not created one. CAM are not created one. But this thing they created on the 30th of October, called the interim government, went towards the nerve center of the Republic. They did not even know all these people called Yoktabe. They knew him not so much as a politician. No. So from 30th of October 2017 to January 5th, 2018, it's just about 1 month, 36, 38 days. Yaoundé was meant to decide to put an end to that nonsense called government. That's why they infiltrated. In fact, remember that Yaoundé is a government. They have all the intelligence within them. They have people from France advising them. They have Israelites inviting them. They warned them, look, that thing they set as an interim government is going to destroy you. It's going to destroy this your fight that you have been fighting to assimilate them. So once they set up the so-called interim government on the 30th of October 2017, Yaoundé reactivated its activities to destroy the notion of an interim government. Within 35 days, they went to Nigeria to decapitate that thing. That's why they went to Nigeria, crossed Nigeria, and caught Sisiku. And whoever was associated with it there, they brought him and put him in jail, thinking that they had cut off the head of the snake, called the interim government. And that's what they are there today. But they soon realized that the snake was not dead. It has not yet been decapitated. The interim government, upon catching Sisiku, was underground from strength to strength. And so what have they done? Let our people listen to this very, very well. They are deployed. Since then, they have used all the technology they have, all the techniques they can find, all the money that they can borrow from the world. Now that they realize that they cannot destroy the interim government, they must set confusion within the interim government. That accounts for what we find there. Interim government by A, Choyaba, Marianta, another one by Anu, another one by you or me. Their goal is to show that there's no central authority. They have nobody to negotiate with. And so they set up this thing. For example, you go to Canada now, which is their sponsor. They find Marianta there. He's also a member of the interim government. But they say, well, this is also an interim government. Anu say he was not there. Yeah, but he participated. Because he wrote to them and said, well, give us the federation. He wrote to them and said, okay, if you want me to continue, release Ayoktabe. So what is killing Yaoundé as we speak is the notion of interim government. Because they didn't just go, I don't know who thought about the interim government in Nigeria, but give those people the credit of far thinking very, very far. Give them the credit. I dove my heart to whoever thought about the idea of an interim government. Because that was not the first government we formed. We had formed a government in 2002, I think, in Washington, D.C., under Professor Nyangwe as the prime minister. But it was not the national interim government. So when they created this thing, interim government, with ministries, with other things, the whole idea of interim government went on the nerves of Yaoundé and their supporters.
That is
they
the
did
history.
not know. I'm not sure that these people who set up that thing in Nigeria during the fourth conclave, they did not even contemplate what the interim government is today, with the whole defense department, with the whole treasury, with the radio that you and me are talking about. They did not contemplate that. They didn't have that in mind. But these are things that enough, that anger Yaoundé to the core, that frightened them. They don't even anger them, they frighten them. But because today, the interim government can knock at the door of another country and say something. That's what angers them. with the Swiss-led initiative. If the Swiss-led initiative was initiated by Choya, by Kwanga, by you or me as an individual, they will go there because they meet you as an individual and get what they want to get. But once it was initiated by the IG, something called a government, then they can no longer. The government has more than one person meaning. It is not your own the government, which probably or you just says and they accept. No, it's a government with different institutions. So this thing progressed to a point that they can no longer control it. Yes, as I said before, cash away President Sako, take him away, kill him, take him to jail. The LGA by LGA will still remain there. The county by county will still remain there. The Treasury Department will still remain there. So how do you decapitate a government? If it is the government of the people, for the people, and by the people. Ambazonians have by far and large bought into the idea of a government. That's why the ghost town that we talk about. When they say ghost town, nobody is asking who is asking us to go on ghost town. Only a stupid man other thing. They say, well, the government said today is ghost town. My mother and the may not even know who is called the government. But you know there's a leadership in this thing called government. And so these instructions are obeyed. It's not because they loses money. No. They fear the ghost towns for what it stands for the mobilization they can get to the grassroots. It can get to every village. Everybody in every village, in every corner, knows what the interim government is, which they wanted to avoid at all costs. But unfortunately, they have not avoided it. It is still hurting them. It will hurt them until the government gets to Buya. Thank you.
Wow. I'm sure that these answers and this rundown history was not only for Vivian, but we thank her for asking that doubtful question, for get so clear to come to where we are. Thank you very much, Barrister, that you have outlined the whole thing systematically, chronologically, to come into where we now have the interim government, which is the major obstacle of La République du Cameroon. And they have done everything to discomfit it, dislocate it, so that they can go back to groups, and then they'll be able to chase Ambazonians out of their land, as they have done in the past. But thank God, this is the never again generation that is thinking. They have refused to drink the poison, the alcohol that they give to people, and the people think less. It's unfortunate that the Ambazonians who are at home, like the Ngutis, the John Gutes, and the Nosonge them and all the people them, they are still drinking that booze from France, and so they cannot reason, coupled with other things. But we are gone. All right. Now, consecutively in the president's speech and some other occasions, he has emphasized that Ambazonia is the 55th nation of Africa. And when I try to find out, I discovered that it closed into the 196th country of the world. And now the president is emphasizing and telling the international community, the AU, the UN, the EU, and all of that, to give us our seats where necessary in these organizations. What do you have to say as touching this 55th nation that Mr. President of Ambazonia has been declaring in his speeches at home and abroad?
I believe personally that, see, it's a question of time. The president is right, and I support that that notion personally. Support it with all my life and all my strength. Because, as again, I said in one of my segments, trying to fit a round, a square hole into a round hole is not going to, can never work. That's never worked anywhere. This so-called union, which is being imposed on us, for the past 50 years, it has proven that it did not work. First and foremost, because of the dishonesty of one of the parties. It has not worked. It will not work. Are we getting nearer to the goal? I'm sure we are getting nearer. Shall it be difficult? Yes. Those of us who grew up in those days, there used to be something they call relay game, relay race. The relay race was run by 4 people. Every team had 4 people, 4 runners. You ran and handed the baton to your friend. Some people didn't even get to the next point, they fell. They didn't continue, but the relay did not end. And so we're winning this thing, though it's looking difficult, but God willing, we're going to be the 55th nation of Africa. It's not going to be an easy thing. It has never been easy. The Republic that is doing all this, their so-called independence of 1960 was not an easy thing for them. They had to fight with what they call so-called Maquisards. And let me use this to address, yesterday in your presentation, you talk about the Maquisards, whether Ahijo could not just cross to Kumba, to Tombe, and catch those Maquisards. He could not. It was not even Ahijo. When this thing started in 1955 to 56 under the UPC, there was no Ahijo there. It was the French who were the administrators and trying to relegate the country to independence in their own way. They could not order their troops to cross to Kumba or to cross to Tombe from Lum, because they knew that Tombe, which is nearest to Lum, was under UK administration. They understood foreign affairs. They knew that they could not cross. Even somebody just jumped across the border and stood there and was waving, they would not go across to catch him. So it was not even there. He was not even there. He did not even exist. Though he continued after a so-called 1960 independence. And so if you look at it again, the majority of African countries, French-speaking African countries, got independence very early in 1960. Cameroon was the first January, but no constitution, nothing. Why did they do this? It was not a coincidence. A year before, in 1959, they met in Brazzaville and handed all these things to France by these cooperation agreements. All of them signed. The few who did not sign were left out. But those who signed, they were promised independence at the shortest possible time. So that during that very period of time, France would use its influence to install them as leaders for as long as possible. And you remember, most of those French-speaking African countries that got independence by early 1960, they had one party. They had one party rule. They didn't even have elections. No, they had any referendum, any constitution. It was meant to serve the French. And today it still serves the French. When they used Paul Ahijo until they discovered that he was no longer going to be useful, they brought a leader and put there. And said, okay, this guy will succeed this one. And they will use him the way they wanted to use. The same thing in Gabon. They put Paul Biya there as the stooge. He has ruled the country as president for 40 years, rendering account not to the Cameroonians that he purposed to rule, but to the French. That's why when he wants to hold a national dialogue, call it national dialogue, whatever thing he did, he had to go and take permission from France. When they hold and make their recommendations, he has to go to France and render account to a certain Macron, who is not even off to his first son, but he enjoys the status of the president of France. And so it is not by accident. And now that Paul Biya is on his exit way, naturally, he's going to die. At 89, he's dying. Like you and me will die. The French are busy looking for somebody to put in place, to be him, to execute their policy. And what's their policy? Their policy includes the most important thing that the French have gained from Africa. Is that you can go and trade with China, you can go and trade with Russia. All the trading will pass through France. They pass through the French treasury. All the money that you have, they'll pass through the French treasury, who will keep the portion that they want and give you what they like. That is something. It doesn't matter whether Cameroon, Central Africa trades with China or trades with Japan. No. The franc is based in the French treasury. If the Chinese pay in their money, in their currency, it will go through France and be transformed first into the French franc, into the franc, before you are paid whatever thing the Chinese are giving you, whatever thing the Russians are giving you. They have lost nothing. They are still trying to entrench themselves in those places. So again, what the president says, which I said, if you take it from what I said, those who conceived the idea of government took us too far. At the time they were conceiving the idea of government in the fourth conclave, I'm very, very sure of this. I'm not sure up to 2% thought of a man called Sako coming to that thing. He was not even there. They never contemplated a man like Sako. And so it has dawned on the international system based on what we are saying. That's why we say this broadcast goes to the world and to the United Nations. The United Nations that preach unification by plebiscite did not contemplate what Yaoundé was contemplating. And that accounts for why, even where they're voting resolution 1608, France and the Republic voted against it because their contemplation was not a federation of two equal states. Their contemplation was an assimilation. They voted against it, against the United Nations. So, as you've said, what the president has said is perfectly correct. It's a difficult journey, but it's one of the shortest journeys to full independence that I've noticed in my own lifetime. So rest assured, we're getting to the final goal. Shall we have distractions? Yes. We're going to have, after Anus, we're going to have many more Chris Anus. We're going to have many more Mariantas. They will always be there. As I've said in my opening remark, Yaoundé uses you to destroy me, uses me to destroy you. They will look for people among ourselves. Some who are so ignorant, some who are so poor, some who are just anything. And this takes me to this. You see, the last few weeks, we've been talking about the so-called Canadian talks. There are people who were originally there. Now they're all voting out. As in why they were there, they will give you different reasons. But I think it is simply that they did not even understand what was going on. And this is my own advice. Canada may succeed, may fail. Another one will come up tomorrow. But what is the guiding principle for knowing who is a rare negotiator? For knowing whether you are going to talk to people who mean something? Ask a simple question. Yes, they pay my air ticket to come there, or me and my supporters. Who is paying this air ticket? Who is funding these things? If that ask this question, you to realize that the funding was coming from Yaoundé. Could Yaoundé fund you to come and oppose them? Never. That was what happened with the CDN. I've said this many times before. I was contacted by the CDN organizers. And my simple question is, who is funding this thing? People are flying from all over the world to Canada. Who is funding it? This is not we're paying out of our pocket. That's a warning sign. They are lying. Somebody is funding it. The Swiss-led initiative that they all opposed. The funding was clear. It was known who was funding what. And so, if in future something comes up like that, our brothers and sisters, professors, lawyers who are invited to go to these things, you don't need to come to my school to learn those things. You know it better than I do. Ask a simple question. Who is funding this thing? Because money is important. The pocket is the most important thing in the world. Yeah. With the Canadian government, by whom our brothers have been deceived, could they remove money from the Canadian treasury to do that? No. The Canadian government, like the United States government, like any civilized government, they have a budget. They don't just put money like on the city and make a decree and say send money. Who is funding it? If our brothers and sisters who went to Canada had asked this simple question, they would have realized that they were being deceived. They were being deceived. Yaoundé was funding it, and Yaoundé is prepared to fund it to destroy what we are looking for. They can never be neutral. They can never be neutral to fund you to come and oppose them. I would not do that. They don't even have the money. They are taking loans to sponsor you to come and oppose them. And so people don't people don't look at those things. Again, you ask yourself, where am I? Am I free to say what I want to do? No. The Konenge people, Mokwi, whoever were there is no way that they will carry you in a prison truck to Mvolie, to Boya, to Bamenda, to negotiate, and then they bring you in a prison truck and put you in prison, and you say you're a free man. No, they will never do that. That's the main reason why they put you in prison. So they can control your movement. They can control your thoughts. Are they so stupid to pay planes, hire planes to come and kidnap you from Nigeria, put them in prison, and then you dictate their pace to them? Then they must be dead, stupid people. So these are things that we should learn. I'm sure those people in the Kondenge who have been postulating for this thing must now have realized that their freedom is not going to depend on themselves. One of the ways for them to get freedom is to escape, which is legitimate. But you cannot even escape until you have somebody else who will help you jump the fence, carry you in his vehicle through the back bush to go and hide you. So your freedom is not dependent on yourself. You cannot do that. It's practically impossible. The only way you can depend on yourself is you lie. Tell them, oh, now I support you, and then they set you free. You go on and run away. But you cannot sit there and say, oh, I'm for Southern Cameroon independence, and think that your enemy who brought you there for saying that in the first place will set you free. It will never happen. They can promise you anything. When they go out, it will change. That's allowed. Propaganda is part of international politics. You make propaganda. You say, I'll move the moon, I'll go to the sky and tell those lies. I will send you a university in Boya that will have all the faculties in the world, plus the medical school. When the medical school comes, they say, no, we didn't say that. The medical school must comprise all the 10 regions of people. There are medical schools in Douala University. I've never heard them put a ratio for Anglophones to go there. Never. Neither is it in Chang. Neither is it in Yaoundé. They don't do it. All that propaganda is just to deceive you. They tell you again, for example, oh, the Grand National Dialogue may also put an English bench for the common law in the Supreme Court. It's a lie. There's nothing like that there. There's not a half people in the Supreme Court, even as judges. There's nothing like the English bench, the common law bench at the Supreme Court. Absolutely nothing. There's nothing like the common law section in Enam. Putting under pressure and meeting 20 Anglophone lawyers into Enam does not make it a common law bench. Because next year they will meet nobody. Those benches, those departments of the Enam or of the Supreme Court are created by law. They say Enam shall comprise this section, civil law, English law, they shall comprise commercial law. They put it there in writing. Where is the text? The Supreme Court does not just exist, it is created by text. They say, okay, the Supreme Court shall comprise the common law bench of 5 judges or 2 judges, the civil law bench, the commercial bench. Where is the text? They put out that
which is complete deceit.
Yes,
complete deceit. Yeah, and just put it in paper to deceive the Ambazonians who think that their plight and their situation has been regulated. And at the end of the day, they go ahead normal. Wow.
What does it help us if they took 20 common law lawyers in Enam?
Yeah, and
when they graduate, they send 5 to Garawa, send 4 to Beltua, send 1 to Bamanda. How does that help us?
Nothing. Well, Barrister, thank you so much for this explanation. Like I told you, and I'm talking to the people now, the people outside there and the Ambazonian people. Our purpose in our Amba history is to outline to you the details of what you are not privileged to know, because the major purpose of La République de Cameroon is to hide every bit of truthful information to you Ambazonians. Of course, if they do that to their citizens, it's not our problem, because absolutely their citizens are living in blindness. Like you have heard, Ambazonia was organized in those days of British Southern Cameroon and West Cameroon. It was very organized. It was not tumbu bash calabash. No, it was not a try and error. Everybody was in his perspective place to carry out the functions he's supposed to carry out. But when this complete disarray came in with these fellows because they want to steal, they want to kill, they want to, murder, and all is planned by France in order to keep sucking from Africa, especially those countries they purportedly say they have given their independence. Meanwhile, they are still proconsuls for France in Africa. Well, Barrister, sincerely speaking, thank you so very much. Our time is gone, really gone, but I would like you to say your concluding statements. And before I let you go, Barrister, I would like you to promise our audience on Ambazonia history that you are coming back, because what you are saying, I will tell you without mixing words, that 3/4 of the people, some of them who are slave boys and slave girls in La République du Cameroon, don't know. And if they happen to know this, I am sure they'll be thinking otherwise. Possibly not for themselves, if they are very sincere, to leave a posterity for their children, that what they have gone through, their children should not go through. I think they lack this basic knowledge. And that's why Amba history is here to educate, to teach, to advise, to counsel, and to make them take right decision. Over to you for your final word, and we'll call it quit for today. And don't forget, promise us you are coming back.
Thank you, Komando. I will come back. But
Very
before
good.
I come back, I've said this many times before. There are two different types of history: oral history and documentary history. What I've said here is all documentary history, which I've said I open myself to any challenge. Okay. If there's no historian in Ambazonia, in East Cameroon, in the world, who has a contrary federal constitution, which I've quoted here, Article 5, 6, and 7, let them show me in that federal constitution of 1961 what powers was reserved for the federated states. That's a document there. I read the document. If there's anybody who has a contrary constitution, then put it out there. I've talked about the United Nations. They have been a cross path with Yaoundé and France. If there's anybody who has read history, who has read law, who has any document issuing from the United Nations that said they were reunifying with Cameroon instead of unifying, let them produce that document. There are consequences. When you say reunifying, it meant that we were just like one of the 4 regions that existed there. I've given the examples of their regions and the symbols they put there in Yaoundé, which I see standing there to show there were 4 regions. The other became the 5th region. We did not become a 5th state. If there's anybody who does this again, show me any document in the federal constitution that empowered Ahidjo to appoint a federal inspector of administration to override the powers of the prime minister of Southern Cameroon. So I stand to be corrected. This is history documented. They are not my imaginations. If there's anybody who does me again, show me a document that states that the Canadian government was funding the Canadian initiative. Show me the document. The Canadian government does not just pick the right. So show us the document that Canada committed. This document will pay so many millions to fund the Swiss initiative, the Canadian initiative. So it's all documentary. If we have these facts, I do my heart to you. Otherwise, our fight is legitimate. We're fighting against fraud. The whole idea of federation in 1961 was a fraud by Yaoundé at cross purposes with the United Nations. And that's why, again, they fought right to the Hague to overturn the wishes, the freely expressed wishes of Northern Cameroon, with an attempt to make them reattach themselves to Cameroon. There's no document like that. Finally, the 1946 Trust Agreement that was signed by France, it was signed by Yaoundé, it dealt with all trust territories. Let somebody point out in that document any article that contemplated a reunification of the divided territories. It did not only concern Cameroon. It concerned other countries, Togo, other countries that were divided after the Second World War, after the First World War. Let somebody point in that agreement of 1946, 13 December 1946, in the article that contemplated a reunification of the divided territories that were becoming trust territories. In the absence of that, I say sorry for you, you're on the wrong path. You can win the battle by force, but you're not going to win it intellectually. Thank you very much. Thank you for listening. I hope I've learned a lot. Thanks very much again. I will be here next time when it's time.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. That conclusion, I'll be here next time when it's time, is very powerful. And that's what I wanted to hear. All right. For today, we want to thank all of you who have participated and you have listened to and heard from the horse's mouth what is going on and what is supposed to be. To let you know that Ambazonia is not a country that La Republique just picked by the side and can toy with it as if they don't know their origin. They've tried over the years, but today they are coming to know that we have known their tricks. And that's why they try to destabilize the interim government, but the interim government is still standing there strong and firm. La Republique, once more, let's go to the table and to the right table, not your fake table creating, because they will not avail for nothing. It is delayed, but it must happen. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming. We're announcing to you shortly when Barrister will be coming back after I've talked with him, and we shall have another time. Remember, he has told us two things. One thing here that is in two. There is written history and there's oral history. And all of what, three-quarters of what he has told us tonight, if not 90% of what he has told us, is all written history. We are coming back. God bless you and have a wonderful day. Don't forget, don't go away. In a few minutes, Reverend Victor will be coming up here with liberation prayers for Ambazonia. Meanwhile, brother, come in and then.